All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining a new episode of RegenMigrants. Today, I am here with Oliver and with a very specific set of consequences and ideas that we've already talked about for half an hour. We said, let's just turn the mic on and see what happens. So, Oliver, thank you so much. Dankeschön. And maybe over to you. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Oliver. Had a lovely conversation already with Leila, and yeah, she said we had such a good conversation that we just decided, let's just fling it. Let's just start recording. Yeah, I'm originally from Berlin. I'm the founder of Rewilding. What we are doing is we're creating a mental health app that helps people to transform eco-anxiety into action and use a lot of that money to protect and restore nature. And so we thought like, hey, I'm living nowadays in France and the West Coast in the Basque Country. But I'm originally from Berlin and I lived in a couple of other countries. And so, yeah, Leila and I thought it would be cool to share maybe a bit of the story with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think it was so interesting that we were both a little bit unsure because somebody from my network, amazing, recommended Oliver. And once I opened up your website, 10 seconds in, I said, I have to speak to this guy. But then we've all brought up really good points, right? You're German and you live in France, so it's not like you've had to travel that much to get from one place in comparison to maybe other people that might call themselves migrants. And also you made a very good point. You are a white man that has achieved a lot of things through your hard work, but also living in a society that we live in today. Maybe you had a couple of things that were a little bit easier than it might be with other people looking in. And so it was really interesting to kind of you bring that up. I wasn't having to be the one to say, guys, it wasn't only the thing on my mind. So it was really good. Like, honestly, I was so happy that you're the one that brought up this conversation. And yeah, I just wanted to maybe hear from you a couple of the things that we were talking about, like, you are also somebody that's moved abroad a lot and you've also studied about migration. So concepts like Braindrain, concepts like expat versus migrant, what do those things mean to you and how do they relate to your own story?
Yeah, no, entirely. I think you brought up already like a lot of points. I think it's really important that the conversation, especially also, is much more driven, like coming from people like me that experienced all this privilege. We need to be louder and be really reflecting on ourselves and not just like give ourselves a pat on the shoulder like, oh, we are so amazing, but be really honest about like also like how we got there in the first place. And I think that's a conversation that is still not happening enough. And so I'm always like to press forward and make it really, really clear that yes, I work hard and I do my best, but damn, like, I mean, you know, got the lottery, like the random birth lottery that basically tells you what passport you're going to get. And, you know, like I got it. Like, and so it's just not fair. And so I'm always thinking it should be much more of a bigger conversation. So how did it affect me? My family is from the East Germany. So for basically until the 90s, they couldn't move outside of East Germany. So I think that had some sort of impact on me because they couldn't migrate at all. They were basically there in East Germany and you couldn't go out. And luckily the wall fell. And I was then the first generation a bit like after this. And I probably took it to the other extreme. I was traveling. And I mean, that's another point where you really realized how privileged you are, because, you know, when we are traveling, where we're coming from Germany, first of all, you don't have any visa issues. So you have a really powerful passport. So when I was traveling to Australia, I was living in Australia and I was living in Turkey, I was living in Iceland, I was living in South Africa, France, and Germany. And basically in none of those countries, you have really had like problems to get in. And that's already where the adventure for most people starts. So most people, they can't even get in, or they have to go in through an entire huge process when they're traveling. I was just last week, I was at the Blue Earth Summit, and there were literally people that were coming from the global south to have this difficult discussions about privileges and so on. And they couldn't be at that workshop about where this discussion was supposed to happen because they couldn't get the visa. So that's already like shows like how messed up this entire system is. But obviously that didn't affect me to the same extent. But the more I was traveling and the more I lived in the other countries, I realized like even more how privileged I am, because especially like in South Africa, it just hits you in the face. You come on the airport and then you're driving into the city and you're passing like all these townships that are still the remainder of apartheid system, So it's again like another privileged system that, like, yeah, if you're white male, you don't experience it to the same extent, not at all. And so it gets like, with every country I lived in, it became like more just like more transparent to me, like how privileged I really am. And since then I will also try to educate myself a bit more about that. So when I was living in Iceland, as Leila said, I did a course especially about like migration and political systems behind that. And yeah, one thing that really bothered me is that we have this even the different titles for people. So if I go into a different country, then I'm a digital nomad, I'm an expat, I have all these other fancy words. And if somebody else comes from the global south, quite often to the north, then it's a refugee or it's a migrant, or like much nastier words that a lot of people use. So, and that already shows again, like how messed up the system is. And then Leila and I, last thing, and then I will hand over a bit to Leila again. One of the things, an example where it gets really, really, really vivid is, for example, Braindrain. So that is when we say like, okay, we need a certain set of skills and we need people because our local population doesn't want to work in this, or there's other factors that kind of cause this. And then people are gladly welcome from Global South and from other countries, from the Philippines, from Kenya, from Nigeria. Then they're all welcome because we have a use for them. And that's just like so messed up. And then at the same time, people with this highly skilled, like doctors, lawyers, and so on, they are then not in the country where they're originally from. Thereby, again, just like keeping that gap, historical gap that was based on, now we would deep dive into a lot of history why we have that gap to begin with, but basically really avoiding that other countries actually ever have a chance to build up the same wealth and to create the same system that we have, like social system, for example, that we have here in France, Germany, and co.
Exactly. No, I loved everything you were saying, because as you're saying, it's a lot about my own trajectory, right? So I also kind of studied international relations. I went to a public university in Brazil, and that's always a conversation that we had, because it was clear that if there was a course that people were trying to get out of the country, it's probably international relations. And then we go to this university, it's a free university. And so I'm always thinking, how do I give back? How do I give back? And definitely haven't done enough, definitely still need to do more. And this is one of my ways to see who is kind of doing some really good things, and how can I maybe be more impactful instead of me maybe going volunteering in one thing. How can I try to connect people that are doing some really great work? And talking about that, the reason I wanted to really have the conversation with you is to talk about your work, because my tagline is going from sustainability to regeneration. And to me, whenever you're talking to a big corporate, you're like, you just started explaining what sustainability is. You just got them to calculate their carbon. And their carbon is probably just a bunch of estimations. Nobody really knows. But how can we, which I think is something that the Global South does really well, is leapfrog technologies, right? So it wasn't really possible to get every single person in Brazil to have a phone line. But the moment we had a cell phone, we kind of jumped over that and said, okay, forget about that. Stop, turn that company off, turn it off. Let's leapfrog and let's go to something better. And I think that your company is one of a great example of that, not just for what you do as a company, but also about how you're thinking about your operations and your processes. So before I talk anymore, I'd love to hear from you what you're doing, why you're doing, what's happening. Let us know.
No, so where to start? So when I was growing up, I always loved nature, and I just realized that not everybody shares the same fascination. The older I grew, I realized, okay, I'm more in the minority. Not so many people love it, at least to the same extent as I do. And that kind of kept me up. And I just couldn't understand like how we destroy so much in such a fast pace, and we don't, talking about regeneration, why do we destroy much faster than what we rebuild, regenerate, rewild? It didn't make sense to me, because in the end, like if you just like learn a bit of the basic maths, you can always extract something, but sooner or later there's nothing there. And so if this idea never really, I never really understood that. And then I tried to look into it. And when I was like growing older, I then had to make the difficult decision, okay, what do I study? And I was literally in that position where I was like, okay, I love animals, I love wildlife, so I would love to become a zoologist or a marine biologist. But I realized that, at least personally for me, that I believe businesses are really at the force of what's currently wrong in our society, and also from the environmental spectrum. They are the driver, like why so many things gets destroyed. And I was like, how did they get away with this? And how did we kind of create the system? And what are kind of the techniques that they're using to destroy the planet? And can we, if I understand the system, can I maybe either change the system, or can I at least use the techniques that they use to sell shoes, to convince you that you should drink brown sugary water to make you sick, and actually call that like super happy magic drink, if I could use that, but for something good. So that was a bit like already the beginning of the idea that I will talked about at the beginning. Wildya is our company, where that was coming from. So I decided to study business, because for me that was like, I can probably have like a bigger impact. And then I took down this road. Then I was studying in those different countries. Was working in different industries. I was always working in tech. So I was working in e-commerce. I was working with NGOs. I was working with mobility tech and tourism tech, but never fully like for biodiversity and nature. And that was always something that was really dear to my heart. A second thing that you need to know about me, I always love to be really super transparent. I had like mental health issues when I was young. My parents split up, and then I had to go to a psychologist, and I don't know what it's really called. I should really remember the English term for it, but basically, when you extensively wash your hands, and you, for example, you have to walk forwards and backwards, and to check if the door was locked. And so
I don't know if it is, but OCD?
Yeah, but
No?
I think definitely to a more extreme extent.
Okay.
But yeah, anyways, from a young age, I really was conflicted, and I was really seeing the power, how important mental health is. And basically, psychologist, talking again about privilege, mental health privilege. Luckily, I was able to get like to children's psychologist that was paid by my mom to work through those issues. And thanks to him, I live now the life that I could live. And again, we're talking about privileges, because a lot of people don't have access to this. So that were a bit like the two ways. Like, I don't know, can people actually see the video, or like, but there were basically those two ways, like nature interest and mental health interest. And so, like when COVID hit, I realized two things. First thing is, like, my entire life was not having enough nature in it. Like, I didn't go enough in nature. My entire community around me didn't care really about nature. My work, I could somehow justify it maybe slightly, but nah, to be honest, didn't really affect nature at all. So I realized that. The second thing that I realized is that I got through the COVID crisis much better than others mentally, because I had these other exposures before, because I had that privilege of like going through a crisis before, working through it, and then being exposed at such a young age also meant I was studying a lot about that. So I got to that stage, and I was like, ooh, I want to help people, but my major focus is really the environment, because that's what I care most about. And I was like, okay, why can't, maybe if I solve a human problem, I can then use that money to actually fix the nature problem. And that's where then like Wildya basically came up with, is that what we're doing is we create an app that helps people to transform eco-anxiety into action. We do this via courses that helps people to learn more about neuroscience, psychology, and so on, so that they understand, first of all, themselves a bit better, that they get the tools to just navigate in this really messed up world, that it's just getting more complex and more fast and more confusing every single day, that they get these kind of tools, and that hopefully the anxiety and so on is really strong. But hopefully how they can use that emotions and that anger as well to use for something positive, to really transform it into action. And if that really helps people, then the hypothesis is that people will hopefully be also happy to pay, because in the end we pay for Netflix, we pay for Spotify, we pay for our lunches and so on. So it could be hopefully that people feel like, hey, this is cool. I like that. I pay for that. And if people decide to subscribe, what we then do is we take 15% of that subscription to then pay nature and show you that as well. So we have a partner that protects and restores the area forever. And what we can then say is that you as a user, if you start to work on your mental health, just by working on your mental health, you automatically also protect 1 square meter in Australia forever per month. So basically, the more you work on yourself, the more also like nature comes back. And just, you don't even need to do anything, you don't need to donate extra on top. You don't need to do extra actions, nothing. It's just like our decision is like to cut our profit and actually put nature at the heart of our business model. And maybe I said enough now, at least to frame it a bit. Maybe Leila, you have some bouncing questions or something.
No, I think that I really liked the concept because I had heard about 1% for the future. I'm part of the B Corp movement. So hearing all of these things that businesses are already doing, getting certified and going beyond what maybe large corporates are doing, right? But the step beyond that is already B Corp 1%. And then when I went into your thing and you said 15% and you were, this is why, I said, oh, this is the better reiteration of that. And one of the things that I really, really like is that we don't keep reinventing wheels. We find the shoulders of giants and then we go stand on them and do bigger and bigger things. And what I wanted to ask you is, how did you come to that 15%? Because I'm sure you've done way more research than I have on what are the best things happening out there. And how can my business even be a differentiator? So not only can I call out the big corporates, but I can be like, hey, I'm a step ahead of you. Can we think of more to do better? Because we don't got time for this, you guys. So yeah.
No, that's a very good question. 15%. I mean, I'm a startup. I shared that in our previous conversation. I shared that with you. Like, we are a startup. So startups is always the easy role. You're kind of on the opposition and you tell all the other people like, you do this shit, this shit. We are the great new company around. Look at us. Until you have product market fit and you're really longer in the game for like years, I think it's always too careful to be with this really like claims. But what we want to do and what we want to showcase, and where basically Wilder would be a bit the guinea pig, is that we want to showcase that nature has to be part of the business model. It can't be just like at the end of the year where we have some little coins left, we give nature a bit of the deal. No, it needs to be really in our daily operations. It needs to be paid for its services. We decide that nature gives us a lot of inspiration. So if you go into the app, a lot of nature inspired us for that app. And so we said, like, similar to Spotify, that is intellectual property and nature should be compensated for that. Why 15%? I initially wanted to start it with 50. Then I went to 30 because I was like, okay, 50 is not going to work. The problem is always like, the problem is not now, the problem is in the future. If you want to scale an idea and if you really want to create impact, because impact is basically scaling positive actions. If you really want to scale that idea and if you want to help as many people as possible, then you need to go quite often the VC route. That's unfortunately one of the only ways right now to really, really scale your product. And the problem is with 50%, you don't get there. 30%, I thought like, okay, that can work and so on. Now you have the problem that companies like Apple and Google, if you make more than 1 million with your app, which is like a high number, you need to get there. But if you get there, then they take 30% of that, 30% right from the subscription amount. So if you have another like 30 for nature, like basically you can't, like this idea wouldn't survive. But what I said is like, okay, 15 is that as long as we are under 1 million, the Apple price and the Google price is like 15%. And I was like, hey, this is a amount that I think nature should get too, because why is it normal for us to pay Google or Apple 15%? But as soon as we ask the same question about nature, we're like, oh, no, that's too much. And that's not I think that's not the right way to go. I was also sharing with Leila a bit before, we're already partner of 1% for the planet. And I think the idea is great because at least the companies there are doing something. I mean, 1% is better than nothing. It's basically you commit yourself, for those people that don't know, you commit yourself to donate 1% of your entire revenue to donate. And I think that is a great starting point. But now, if you're looking into the statistics, we know that nature is 50% of our global GDP is dependent on nature. So now if you make a bit the math and you say like, okay, on one side we pay nature 1%, but it's basically 50% of our entire GDP is dependent on, something didn't add up for me. And so I was like, nah, it needs to be bolder. So we starting with 15%, but always with a goal, how to maximize that. So right now I'm starting with 15% because that's, I think, is the realistic way for the stage that we're in right now. But I would love to push that even further. But finding the balance as a startup between scalability so that we can reach and help more people with their mental health, and also helping more people would always mean more nature protection, while also like having the impact. So that will always be like really hard to find like the right balance. I think that will be definitely our challenge in the future. So sometimes maybe you need to cut down the percentage a bit, or you leave it at 15%, but you can help much more people, and that's why your impact actually increases. Whereas if you're maybe super ambitious and you give everything away, you maybe never reach actually that impact just because you stick more with a smaller group of people. And one thing before I shut up, two things where the privileges again come into place is that right now in mental health, there's already plenty of solutions for rich people or like for wealthier people. You know, like you have one-to-one coaching, you have retreats, you have rehabs, you have all kind of solutions. You have also tons of free solutions. Nations definitely get better nowadays. There's like hotlines and there's like websites and so on. But we all know how government websites look like and how the content is also presented and so on. So we believe that there's definitely a gap that makes mental health affordable, fun, engaging, easy to understand, and that just helps people to build up. I always like more the term mental fitness. I think like help people with their mental fitness. And that shouldn't be a privilege to me. So yeah.
Really good. And I only have two questions, and my last one is more of a goodbye. So maybe my last question to you is what I'm really into at this moment in time is partnerships. How can I find the right people that I can partner or that I can help partner with, and collaboration, like radical collaboration to live in a better world that I envision? And so if you had to just open like the happy utopian Pandora box of your dreams, who would be the kind of big partners that if they came knocking on your door, you would like go out and celebrate with family? If you had to maybe choose three or one or two that came to your mind, who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, one is it's probably cliche, but I was just like sponsored last week. I was at a global the UK event called Blue Earth Summit, and I was sponsored by Patagonia to actually go there. And so Patagonia is one of those companies. They don't do everything right. There's some articles out there and so on that also criticize them, but I think they also do a lot of right. It's especially at scale. So it's always easier if you're like small because you can just be more agile and you have nothing to lose and so on. I think for like a company of that size, I think they're pushing the industry quite a lot into the right direction. So I definitely want to give them that. And a lot of the pioneering when it comes, for example, when the guy, the founder gave away the shares, or the 1% for the planet, for example, came from Patagonia. B Corp came a lot pushed by Patagonia. So I think they're pushing definitely society in the right direction. So being associated, working with Patagonia, that would definitely be something, definitely a partner. And I think they're also like really strong on the activism. So as soon as you go on the Patagonia website, quite often you actually see activism before you see any of their products. And I think that's definitely something the same direction we want to take. So Patagonia is one. The second one, there's so many partners. There's so many, really, really tricky. Like, okay, I will tell you one thing that I'm still not sure of. Maybe you can give your perspective on it, because it's something that I'm rambling with. I'm not sure what I would do if, for example, a Shell, a BP, one of those companies would ask me if they could, if they could use the app and provide it for their employees, because we want to have a strong B2B network. Because we believe employees can benefit a lot from this solution too. So what would I say if these kind of companies come around? Because on one side, I share with you a bit my thought process, and then I would really love to hear your answer. On one side, I don't want to take money from fossil fuel companies. On the other hand, it's exactly the companies that need to change because they're sitting on so much cash. If they would decide, hey, no, we really stopped fossil fuel now, and we put all that money into energy transition because we need to survive the next decades, wow, that would be amazing. And if our app could somehow get them to that stage, how cool would that be? But I'm super conflicted in that, so I would love to hear Leila.
Put me on the spot. Interview me here. No, I love this because I think about this all the time. One, because I'm really scared of getting something wrong and impacting not just me, my life, but I'm doing something that's impacting other people on the planet. Oh my God. So I guess if I had to come at it logically, I would think about it in two ways. One is the exact way that you said, right? If they're giving me the money to do something that's actually good for the environment, and I can get the best people to come, and we're actually taking their money away from something like reinvesting into more oil, this is it. And if there's a time to collaborate with people you don't really see eye to eye, it's now. And also because sometimes the people that come knocking on the door is always those people like us who haven't left the business, because they say, if I leave, everything's going to shit. So I need to stay because I believe in this mission, and I need to go out and find little people to trickle the message down. And so I've met a lot of people like that don't really love their jobs. They could easily find jobs somewhere else, but they are so concerned that if they leave, the diversity part, the environmental part will go down the window because they've been such active promoters. But then on the other hand, the other side as well, if I was at, okay, let me make some cross negotiation, it would be, okay, I would come work with you if we agreed that after X amount of years, you will have reduced this much because we're working together. So show me your numbers. I'm a data person. I've worked in data for so long. So, I'm investing 100 billion in XYZ. Okay, by the time we start working together, you have to promise that you're going to invest 10 billion in something good, or you'll give me the 10 billion to do something good. Very, very high level. Oh my God, what could it be? But I think that the same reason I reached out to you and the same reason I'm doing this is to put those wild ideas out there and say, okay, give 20 of the best regen people I know that have the most skills, give them 10 million, see what can happen.
That would be beautiful.
And so we don't want money for you. We're not going to be putting you on ads that you gave us this money or or showcasing that, but you did. And let's see what good we could do with it. So I don't know. I think it's the biggest conundrum of our generation, right? How do we do good stuff if we need good money to do good stuff, and the people that have the money are not doing good stuff? So
exactly, a bit like the Robin Hood model then,
so exactly.
take from them. Not sure. So, and then just one thing, and because our pre-conversation that we had before we started recording was a lot about privilege, and I always want to set really right expectation. One of the things why I can work on I always call it a bit like moonshot project, where I combine mental health with nature, and why I can make these kind of commitments is also because, again, privilege. I'm working here in France. In France, there's a system that you can agree with your employer, for example, that you're not working longer together, and you actually have unemployment money, and the French government is supporting you to build your company, and you have 2 years. So you have 2 years to find like something that can pay for the bills. A lot of countries don't have that, so I always just want to put that again, like in realistic. If you feel shit after this podcast because you think like, oh, Oliver is such a great dude and he's like doing amazing things, always put that into perspective. So I was like, at that moment, I had actually a quarter life crisis when I was 27, and that was triggered by eco anxiety because I had the feeling I'm not doing enough for nature. And I quit also my job because I had the feeling I was not doing enough for nature. But the beauty of, I was like, if a white dude that had free education, because I was educated in Germany, free university, everything, that had the privileges to travel, that had also the privilege to get into certain job roles, gain skills, right timing, no really big commitments right now. If people like me are not working on really profound issues that we need to tackle in this world, how can I then be at the same position to say like to people like, you guys, we don't do enough and the world is not changing? How could I do that? Because I know that, like, I'm the most privileged, one of the most privileged percent on the planet. So if we don't tackle and take those problems seriously and work on those real problems in this world, like, how can I then to other people that didn't have any of those kind of chances, that they should change their behavior, they should change their jobs, they should change everything that they do? I think that is just not fair. And so that was just because we started with privilege. I just wanted to finish with privilege because I think it's really important. Where social media got really toxic is like, you see a certain version and you see certain things that are shared. And I try to be as honest and as transparent always as possible. But I just want to share them, especially in podcasts like this. I want to give like really like the full picture, so that people can put it into perspective. Yeah. I work super hard, but still, it's part of the story. Privilege is a big part of the story too.
Look, Oliver,
Yeah.
I am. I'm very happy, I think, with what you're saying, because it's a lot of the things that I think about from a diversity standpoint.
Yeah.
So just being a woman, how can we get men to recognize some of their privilege?
Yeah.
But I'm really happy with a couple of the points that you've raised on here, because that's something I've been freaking out. And that's something that I spoke to Rika in the first episode, because he's also Brazilian. So I am only able to do this because I have 2 years of money saved up, that after I quit my job for health reasons and other things that I wanted to do. And so that's also why I'm here and I'm able to do it. And I can't just call my mom and be like, Mom, can I have some money? And so I really, really appreciate what you're saying here, because finance anxiety is something that is really real, and that drives and kills and supports dreams in many, many ways.
Yeah.
I loved everything you said, and I would love to keep talking to you for another hour. We kind of have already, but I'm trying to keep these videos short our short attention span. And so what I like to always close with is, if you were talking to a group of people, you're on a stage, they're looking at you, they're going to hear what you said, and based on what you said, they're going to go out there and do something. Whatever it is that you think could be useful for this world, for our planet, for the beings of this planet, what would you tell them? And think about not just what you want them to think, but also what you want them to maybe feel to come out of there. And I will say bye for now. I will thank you very much, because I really like ending on that point. So Dankeschön nochmal. With my 6 years of broken German. And merci.
That sounds perfect.
And it's up to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much, Leila, for the opportunity to talk with you and your audience. No, it was, again, really privileged because I get this platform here. So super happy about that. What would I say? I just love nature. And I want people go out, take this podcast. You probably can listen to it in a different formats. Take it out, just go a bit into nature and just be amazed by it. As soon as we open our eyes, there's lichen, there's like little caterpillars, there's like, I don't know, sometimes when the sun hits and there's like some flies that you can see sparkling, some birds that are passing by. There's nature all around us still. It's holds on, it's fighting. And just being in nature, start to appreciate it. And I think as soon as you see this kind of details again, and as soon as you spend some time in nature, you will develop sooner or later a love for it. And if we love it, then we are more likely to protect it. And protection is really good. That's always like the first step that we need to go at. But we actually, what Layla is talking a lot about in her podcast, we need to regenerate. So just sustainability, just sustaining what we have is not enough anymore. We messed up too much with this planet. So we now need to regenerate. We now need to help nature to rewild it. So first step, just go into nature, appreciate it, and then hopefully you can be part of this movement to make this world wild again.
Love it. Thank you so much. Speak to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, thank